Budget Committee and staff. I'm going to call tonight's meeting to order. Are we calling the roll, or is that later in the agenda? I mean, it's not on my agenda, but do I need to call the roll?
Mayor, I can call the roll. This is City Recorder Sue Ryan.
Great. Thank you.
Chris Campbell. Amy Johnson. Teresa Payne.
Here.
Thank you. Mahesh Udatha. Nelson Banyas. Thomas Knapp. Julie Langford.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Lacey Beatty.
Here.
Councillor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Here.
Councillor Teeter.
Here.
Councillor Kimmy.
Here.
Councillor Tivnon.
Here.
Councillor Duggar.
I'm here.
Councillor Hassan.
Here.
Great. Our first order of business tonight is to elect the chair and vice chair. We do have quite a bit of new members joining us. So my suggestion to us tonight is maybe to vote for an experienced chair. So I would take the opportunity to nominate Councillor Duggar to serve as the budget chair. If anyone else would like to serve, this would be a great time to let me know.
Mayor,
No.
do you need a second for the motion?
Well, I was trying to see if anyone else wanted
Oh, okay.
to join us. Okay, well, if I nominate John as chair, would there like to be a second?
This is Councilor Hartmeyer Prigg, I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on tonight's motion? All right, seeing none, will the recorder call the roll?
Councillor or Budget Committee member Chris Campbell. I understand he's joined now. I need a yes or a no on the motion.
Yes.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
I was trying to get my camera turned on here, but yes.
Okay. So a reminder, the motion is for Councillor Duggar to be the Budget Committee chair this year. Amy Johnson. Teresa Payne.
Yes.
Thank you. Mahesh Udatha. Nelson Banyas. Thomas Knapp. Julie Langford.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
Councillor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Councillor Teeter.
Yes.
Councillor Kimmy.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnon.
Yes.
Councillor Duggar.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, well, I'm going to turn it over to the chair to run the vice chair nomination.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to nominate our second longest serving member, Teresa Payne.
Second.
Well, would you accept the nomination before we go through a vote? Great.
Yes.
Awesome. And do we, for clarification, do we vote on this one, or do we open the floor for any nominations?
I would open the floor for any other nominations and then take the vote.
Are there any other nominations besides board member Payne or committee member Payne? Do not see any. Recorder, would you call the roll, please?
I'm sorry, we were answering a text message here. Can you repeat who made the motion in the second?
Sure. The mayor made the motion to nominate board member Payne, committee member Payne for vice chair, and Councillor Hassan seconded the nomination.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps with the minutes tomorrow. Budget Committee member Chris Campbell.
Yes.
Thank you. Amy Johnson. Teresa Payne.
Yes.
Mahesh Udatha. Nelson Banyas. Thomas Knapp. Julie Langford.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty,
Yes.
Counselor Hartmeyer Prick,
Yes.
Counselor Teeter,
Yes.
Counselor Kimmy.
Yes.
Thank you. Counselor Tivnon,
Yes.
Counselor Duggar,
Yes.
Counselor Hassan.
Yes.
Motion carries. Teresa Payne is the vice chair.
Thank you, Recorder. Is there a script beyond the script for the nominations? I'm just looking through my notes. I don't see one.
Yeah, look in the agenda. Oh, I don't know if there's a script, but. 'cause
Yeah, I
this
see
will-
the agenda. Okay.
There's,
Well,
Was emailed to the committee on Friday. I
uh,
can find it and forward it to you. Chair.
I could probably find it. Did you send it or was it from Debbie? I just want to make sure
It was from Susan Cole.
Susan, okay. Ask for your all just for a moment. Let's see. Susan Cole on Friday. So that's the nomination, right? I see that one. It says for nomination of election and budget committee chair. Is there another script? Just for the flow of the meeting, or I'm good without one. I just want to make sure.
yeah, I would say it's probably just the agenda.
Okay. Cool.
There'll be a script next week, so we'll have our next meeting. So let's chat to make sure that we get it, because that will be where voting and stuff.
Yeah.
happens.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this is just an easy one. So, okay, looks like we're at the public input part of the meeting. Recorder, is there any public comments?
Let me
For anyone?
check. I believe we were going to have someone from Portland Community College. Okay, we have about 3 or 4 who have raised their hands. Jessica will promote them one at a time.
Okay. Well, do we have a timer for 3 minutes?
Yes, I will go ahead and pull up a timer and I'll give them speaking privileges.
Excellent. Thank you. And I don't think I can see names, but oh, never mind. I do. Do you want me to call through the names, or do you want to just let me know who you give privileges to?
So I just gave Camille Khan speaking privileges. You're welcome to speak whenever you're ready.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Perfect. Thank you. Respective mayor, city manager, city council members, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace and blessings be upon you. This is Camille Khan, the first and former BIPOC executive director of the Beaverton Downtown Association, who started in 2022. I was terminated by the Beaverton Downtown Association within a year when I asked them to include Syndicate Wine Bar in planning a wine festival in Beaverton downtown so that I don't have to be around alcohol while I was fasting for Ramadan. Syndicate has always supported me and understood my religious boundaries. The board, however, of the BDA terminated me when I said that they should have mandatory cultural sensitivity training after refusing to accommodate my religious beliefs. After leaving the BDA and accepting a role at another organization, a Beaverton City Council member, who, by the way, is up for re-election, participated in post-employment retaliation by rescinding that recommendation that he had written for me for that job and then bad-mouthing me to my new employer. This person was also hired as a consultant by the BDA while they were serving on the city council. I could have sought other channels of recourse, but didn't want to re-traumatize myself. I believe that this budget committee is the right platform to discuss what the city's priority is with downtown Beaverton, which I believe deserves so much better than the Beaverton Downtown Association. The board leadership itself doesn't live in Beaverton and has pushed through 4 executive directors in the last 2.5 years. On average, it takes 8 weeks to train each executive director and even longer to build relationships with businesses. The BDA board president, a white woman, even told me not to invest in historical programming commemorating the Kalapuya people because she said, and I quote, it wouldn't inspire attendance. These are the people who are promoting your equity strategy within downtown Beaverton. The BDA does not deserve another penny of city money because they aren't only a bad financial investment rife with turnover, but the board members of that organization are compromising the ethics of downtown programming and violating their own community standards by ignoring BIPOC-owned businesses, which was shown as my last program where I hosted a historical tour of BIPOC businesses, and we visited each restaurant, and there was no board member except the newest one that showed up. They literally boycotted their own executive director's event that was catering to BIPOC folks. I didn't want to be back in this platform. I never wanted to come back to Beaverton. I was so traumatized when I left. But now that I hear that they're doing the same thing to other executive directors and people of color, I can no longer stay silent. It is traumatic to be here, but one should tell the truth. One should tell the truth even if their voice shakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Looks like the next speaker is Suzanne Hesse. Is that correct? You have 3 minutes. Once you start.
Good evening, Mayor Beatty, Budget Committee members, and City Council members. My name is Suzanne Hesse, and I am the manager of the Future Connect program at Portland Community College. Future Connect is an equity-driven scholarship and support program that has provided advising, mentorship, coaching, and resourcing to hundreds of Beaverton students. We are sincerely grateful for the City of Beaverton's longstanding support. Your investment has opened doors for students, many of them the first in their families to graduate high school or attend college. That's why the proposed $30,000 reduction to this critical program is not only disappointing, it is deeply concerning. As a former coach and now manager, I've seen the power of this program up close. Our students show up ready to work hard, but they face daunting institutional barriers, from navigating financial aid to managing the admissions and enrollment process. These are not minor hurdles. They're make or break moments. Scholarships matter, but it's college success coaching that keeps students on the path. It's coaching that turns access into success. When students are choosing classes, facing eviction, caring for children, experiencing food insecurity, or simply overwhelmed, their coach is often the first and sometimes only person they turn to. These trusting relationships are the foundation of our program, and they are what keep students enrolled, progressing, and graduating. The proposed funding cut would severely limit our ability to deliver this vital coaching, offer scholarships, provide tailored curriculum, and connect students to the resources they need. In short, it would mean fewer Beaverton students getting the support they need to thrive and fewer making it across the finish line. That's why I respectfully and urgently ask the city to restore and increase funding to at least the $65,000 level where it has been for the past 2 years. Beaverton students are ready. They are enrolling, but they cannot succeed without the infrastructure and coaching support this funding makes possible. The City of Beaverton's partnership has been transformative for our students, their families, and the community at large. But at the proposed reduced level, that impact will be diminished and opportunity is lost. Thank you for your leadership and for championing programs that reflect Beaverton's values, equity, opportunity, and meaningful community investment. We are counting on your continued support and again, request that you respectfully raise the funding back to the $65,000 level. Thank you all so much for your time.
Next speaker, looks like the next one is Josh. You have 3 minutes whenever you begin. Josh Laurie. Record, I see his name. What is Josh available?
So he has speaking privileges.
I just got a note. My apology.
No worries.
Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and Budget Committee members. My name is Joshua Laurie. I'm the Director of Student Success Programs at Portland Community College, and I'm here on behalf of the Future Connect program, like my colleague, Suzanne Hesse, who's the manager. This initiative has supported hundreds of Beaverton students in accessing, persisting through, and completing college. I'm concerned to see a proposed $30,000 reduction in the Beaverton's investment in this life-changing program. For our students, many of whom are first-generation college goers, low income, and from historically marginalized communities, Future Connect isn't just financial aid, it's a mentorship network, it's wraparound supports, it's the difference between dropping out and graduating often. Every dollar the city invests in Future Connect has multiplying effect. It helps students persist in college, graduate with less debt, and stay in the region as skilled professionals, educators, and community leaders. Beaverton students in this program don't just go to college, they finish, they lead, and they give back. Cutting $30,000 may seem like a small budget adjustment, but for us, it means fewer students served, fewer coaching hours delivered, and fewer lives transformed. I urge you to reconsider this cut and instead increase your investment to at least the previous $65,000 budget level. This level will help us meet the rising student needs and uphold Beaverton's values. This is your opportunity to align the city funding with Beaverton's strategic priorities, such as inclusive communities and economic prosperity. and the council's goals around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, as well as the long-term financial recovery. More than this, I want to share some of the data I see every day. 81% of our students in the last two cohorts are accessing free and reduced lunch. 93% of the students in the last two cohorts are students of color. 100% of them receive supports to attend college without loans, without debt, because of this program. I leave you with this student quote, with their permission, from our 2022 cohort. And they said, "As I told you, Josh, when I got my associate's degree, general studies, and other certificates, in parentheses, yes, more than one, my scholarship from Future Connect, Oregon Promise, and PCC Foundation, plus my job, I am able to happily say I leave college with no debt and will start my paramedic career without loans hanging over my head. I've been so beyond fortunate to have had the support of Future Connect. I can't say enough about the help and guidance I've received from the coach, this program, and you all." That was a former student of ours. I thank you for your time, and I urge you to consider reinstating the $65,000 budget line item for Future Connect. And I thank you for your continued belief in Beaverton students, families, their youth, and their future.
Thank you. And it looks like we have one more speaker, Jenny. Is Jenny there, ready to speak?
Chair Duggar, so they have speaking privileges, but I'm still seeing them muted.
Jenny, can you come off mute on your end? Yeah, showing us you're muted. Okay. Looks like maybe coming off. Can you hear us, Jenny? Yeah, it looks like we're having technical issues. So, is there any other speakers, recorder?
It does not look like it.
Okay. Well, we'll move forward then. Looks like next on the agenda, and a reminder to the Budget Committee, if you would like to be recognized by the chair to speak, please use the chat function. Just put your name in there, and then we'll recognize you. At this point, next on the agenda is the approval of minutes from May 7th and May 14th of 2024. I'll entertain a motion to do so.
I can take that, Chair Duggar. Make a motion to approve minutes from May 7th and May 14th, 2024.
Thanks, Counselor. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve the minutes as proposed for May 7th and May 14th? Seeing none, I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Chris Campbell?
Yes.
Thank you. Amy Johnson? Teresa Payne?
Yes.
Mahesh Udata? Nelson Banyas?
Yes.
Thank you. Thomas Knapp? Julie Langford?
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Beatty?
Yes.
Counselor Hartmeyer Prigg?
Yes.
Counselor Teeter?
Yes.
Counselor Kimmy?
Yes.
Counselor Tivnon?
Yes.
Counselor Duggar?
Yes.
Counselor Hassan?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Hey, Recorder. Next on the agenda are opening comments for fiscal year 25 to 26, the proposed budget. Mayor Beatty, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everyone. I want to begin by thanking all of you, our staff, my council colleagues, the Budget Committee members, and the community members for your dedication to Beaverton and the process. Tonight isn't just about numbers. It's about the choices and priorities that will shape the future of our city. This is our third budget focused on correcting a structural deficit, a challenge made even more difficult by the limitations of Measure 5 and Measure 50. With our tax base growing by just 3% annually and the inflation outpacing that, we're facing a fiscal challenge that no amount of belt tightening can fully resolve. Cuts alone will not sustain us. We must look seriously at long-term revenue options while advocating for statewide tax reform. Oregonians know the tension. We collect enough tax to issue a kicker, but the system is not equitable. Cities like ours shouldn't be cutting services while the state gives back money with no real rainy day plan. This year, I've taken a different approach. I focused on asking why we're spending, not just what we're spending on. From economic development to public safety, equity, and infrastructure, we need to ensure that our investments align with the outcomes we've promised the community. Today, we're looking at the broad strokes of our priorities. This isn't a time to get bogged down in every detail. Instead, my ask would be, let's focus on the bigger picture and the long-term solutions we're aiming for. I'm proud of the progress we've made. I'm committed to transparency and collaboration as we move forward. However, I know that uncertainty year after year is frustrating. Staff and residents alike have expressed this concern, and we hear you. We owe it to the public and those affected by these decisions to seek long-term solutions that bring about sustainability. In the coming weeks and months, we will focus on proactive steps to ensure fiscal sustainability. This includes pushing for more funding from the state, exploring innovative service delivery models, and evaluating options like a possible tax levy. We will also make tough decisions around cuts, but with the goal of achieving the best outcomes for our community. Our game plan is clear. We will push for equitable funding, explore innovative solutions, and look at all options to ensure Beaverton's future prosperity. Thank you for your continuing dedication to the city and our shared visions together.
Thank you, Mayor. Next on the agenda is the city manager's budget message from City Manager Jenny Hariyama. City Manager, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up.
Yes.
All right. Well, good evening, Budget Chair and Committee. It's my pleasure to present the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget to you this evening. And I'd like to go over what we'll cover today. Tonight, I'll provide you with a high-level overview of the proposed budget and covering some of the successes that we've experienced over the past fiscal year while outlining Beaverton's financial challenges, many of which are affecting Oregon cities today and those throughout the nation. I'll walk you through the proposed budget, how we balance the budget, adjusting our sales despite the storms occurring at the federal, state, and local levels, and provide you with a look ahead as it relates to the budget process. And throughout this discussion, we'll keep perspective top of mind as we better understand the course that we need to chart over the next few years. So even in the midst of the storm, the sun is still shining. I think Dana Lovely says it best. And despite the storms that we've navigated, the sun continues to break through the clouds. And we've seen over the past year, we've accomplished many, many milestones that align with council priorities and from safety to belonging. A couple examples I'd like to share with you. Beaverton Police created a lateral hiring incentive, helping to attract qualified candidates with a limited and competitive labor market. The department leveraged this strategy and their multimedia resources to create a targeted video campaign for recruitment nationwide. And as a result, 13 new officers were hired during the fiscal year to fill vacancies or upcoming vacancies, including the promotion of 2 officers to sergeant. We've seen similar innovations with our Cooper Mountain Community Plan adoption. This multi-year effort, which is managed by our community development staff in coordination with departments across the city, required intense technical review and outreach, and the plan was adopted by council in 2024. For those of you that aren't familiar with Cooper Mountain, it's a 1,200 acre expansion that borders Beaverton. That will be home to more than 5,000 housing units and more than 10,000 residents, including parks and several commercial areas and natural resources. The library also issued over 24 new student library cards, welcomed more than 8,300 visitors to their makered space, and expanded social work services by increasing the on-site library social worker support from 4 days to 6 days a week given demand. And last, the Office of Equity of Inclusion developed the city's first language access plan. This plan aims to break down language barriers and ensure that all residents have access to vital information and services in their preferred language. And the successes continue. The All Rise Treatment Court Institute selected the Beaverton Municipal Court Be Sober program as one of 10 treatment courts to serve as a national model for new treatment courts in the next 2 years. And partnering with all levels of government and nonprofit organizations, the city opened its permanent 12,000 square foot shelter, housing nearly 60 people. And the shelter operates 24/7, providing food, shower, and mental health services, and so much more. The city has also been intentionally focused on its internal operations, providing resource and development opportunities to grow staff and improve service delivery. Over the past year, we've introduced process improvement training to further efficiencies. We've launched a new intranet site to support staff and supervisors, and we've developed monthly communication campaigns to guide content creation and better coordinate comms efforts across departments. And these efforts are truly paying off. We've actually seen human resources team track 1,500 learning and development course completions over this past year. And in addition, staff also improved their time to hire new employees to 60 business days on average, compared to the peer industry standard of 103 business days. Also featured is Embark, a monthly new employee orientation program that pairs new employees with seasoned staff to help them be welcomed to the city. And we launched an Empower program to support our management team strengthen its leadership skills. And to adapt even more quickly to changing technology, we finished a comprehensive IT strategic plan, including a new artificial intelligence policy and cloud smart strategy to reduce our reliance on homegrown systems and product development to avoid extensive customization, reducing our maintenance costs. And last, through the use of a council subcommittee, our council rules were updated to better reflect the new form of government, but more important, guide meeting governance, protocols, and processes. If you want to see the sun shine, if you want to see the sunshine, you have to weather the storm. And as the mayor said, the waters that we're sailing in are rough, and property tax is one of the reasons. The Oregon Constitution limits the annual growth of assessed property values, which restricts how much property tax residents like Beaverton can generate and provide to the city. And as you can see from this slide, Beaverton collects 21 cents for every dollar paid in property tax to fund services like police, library, economic development, planning, and community engagement. You'll hear later in this presentation that the property tax revenue only covers about 50% of the cost of city services. And what's also evident in this slide is that the property tax dollar is shared with multiple agencies. The Beaverton Urban Redevelopment Agency, which we call BURA, encompasses mainly central Beaverton and downtown. And the property tax base in that area is frozen, and any growth goes to BURA, and that's that 3 cents that you see on the screen. Washington County, the Beaverton School District, Tualatin Valley Fire District, Metro, and THPRD, our Park District, all receive a portion of the property tax owners pay annually. There's another reason why the waters that we're sailing in are rough, because the winds that we can't seem to control. There are 3 major headwinds that I want to highlight for you that we're navigating right now: healthcare, retirement, and materials and supplies. Contractually required salaries have increased in addition to uncontrollable escalating expenses like healthcare and retirement. Healthcare costs, as you can see, have increased 8%, but let's talk about that in dollars and cents. That translates to an increase of citywide expenses of $2.5 million. And to the general fund alone, that increases that fund by nearly $1.4 million. But there's a bright light to share. Staff was able to negotiate these increases down by 7.3%, which generated approximately $1 million in citywide savings and a general fund savings of $600,000. Retirement costs, which we also refer to as PERS, have also increased significantly. You can see that it's increased by 17%, but that translates to $2.7 million across the city and $1.5 million in the general fund. And while we cannot control the increase in health in retirement, we can through the labor negotiation process, and we can bargain the cost that the city bears versus what the employees cover. And last, the overall cost of doing business like construction materials and contractor services have also been rising rapidly. Across all funds, though, we were able to mitigate part of these increases and make reductions in the approximate amount of $3.9 million citywide. Specific to the general fund, we made reductions of $1.1 million. As we plan for the year ahead, it's really important to understand how we got here. And as the mayor mentioned, over the past 2 budget cycles, we've taken significant steps to manage our finances. Those changes included adjusting our property tax to the legal limit and updating fees. We've made service and staffing realignments. That includes the elimination of many vacant positions and the reduction of library branch hours. We've also processed efficiencies from changes to our boards and commissions to securing operational assessment grants for our court services. And as you can see, we have more work planned as part of our fiscal sustainability efforts across all funds over the next fiscal year. I appreciate this quote by Dolly Parton, "Storms make trees take deeper roots." The fiscal year 25-26 budget is one that's rooted in resilience. We've learned to better chart our course and protect our ship while anticipating course corrections. And speaking of ships, our funds can be viewed as cabins of a ship, and there are several, from the general fund to debt service. All are important and serve a purpose. The total proposed budget that is before you this evening is just slightly under $500 million, $495 million to be exact. And the pie chart in front of you also includes BURA, the Urban Renewal District, as well as breaks apart the general fund, capital funds, and all of their funds. And you can see that the primary majority of our budget is made up of other funds. And I just want to remind you that the library, utilities, street, building, and debt service, for instance, makes up those other funds. This number also includes contingencies and reserves for all funds as well. But if you back contingencies and reserves out, our actual operating budget is approximately $366 million. There are several landmarks on our budget journey ahead. These are just a few, from incorporating AI into our everyday work and services to multimodal transportation initiatives and leveraging technology, data, and engagement to inform police practices. But our work over the next fiscal year is going to focus on the prioritization of core services, including the North Transmission Line intertie, which will provide a resilient secondary water line, to the update of our city's strategic economic development plan, which will build on the momentum we already have as a regional destination. And of course, the provision of housing through the completed Cooper Mountain Community Plan and preparing for future annexation and new residents. Faye Waddleton, a women's rights activist, said that the only safe ship in a storm is its leadership. And that leadership is grounded in the decision-making framework that was adopted by council that guides the budget development process, which is rooted in 5 principles. And in short, they are to protect critical core services, to spread reductions across city service areas when it's feasible, to minimize impacts to residents, businesses, and employees, and implement sustainable structural reductions. While we are navigating some really choppy waters across all funds for next year, the budget storm that we're facing is a $10.7 million shortfall in our general fund. The shortfall also assumes that the city will underspend by $5 million or 5% based on past trending. We want to make sure that we narrow our shortfall starting point so that we are accurate about what we need to reduce in order to preserve and protect core services. The shortfall was closed through many approaches. The first was a $5.1 million revenue adjustments. These include multi-year opioid settlement proceeds, a modest use of one-time savings, property tax savings due to excess increment from urban renewal, and updated fees and transfers. The second part was $5.6 million in expense reductions, and about half is comprised of vacancy eliminations with minimal workforce reductions. The other half are reductions from materials and supplies or services and transfers out of the general fund to other funds. These next slides I'm going to show you break down the personnel expenditure reductions just a little bit in more detail. With respect to FTE reductions, rounding up, approximately 17 vacant FTEs are proposed to be eliminated. 2.5 FTEs are filled that will be eliminated, and 2 FTEs are limited duration that are attached to grants, and those will be eliminated as well as the grants are expiring. More importantly, though, proposed reductions due to the shortfall are relatively balanced, and they touch many parts of the organization. What I've done is I've listed the areas in which we have impacts throughout the organization by department, and if you'd like to follow along in your budget binder, there are page numbers next to each department. So I'd like to go over those with you just at a high level, and we'll talk about them in more detail as we get into the budgetary discussion around department impacts later on in the presentation. But police budget, there are key changes that include the reduction of the bike team from 4 to 6 officers and the elimination of officer county clinician assigned to the mental health resource team. And I just want to be clear that the mental health resource team unit is not going away and will still be responsible for responding to calls for service within the city of Beaverton. What this means is that Beaverton Police Department will not assign anyone to the team or pay for a clinician, but the service is still available. In community development, we'll be reassigning transportation work to the planning division due to position eliminations. Arts management duties will be allocated to existing staff that have art and placemaking expertise. There are no changes to Arts Commission support. We'll also be eliminating pre-development funding for affordable housing and external engagement work that will be absorbed in-house instead of the use of consultants. The city manager's office will experience reduced analytical capacity due to the elimination of a vacant management position. And community services will eliminate social service grant funding and set aside $100,000. That funding is currently located in the Economic Development Division, and the council will need to determine how to allocate those funds. The preliminary recommendation is to allocate the funds to the nonprofit incubator. And last, as you heard from public testimony, contributions to the Portland Community College have also been reduced to $35,000. And wrapping up with Public Works, this proposes to partially reduce the hanging flower baskets in the downtown to reduce the need for additional personnel to water over 300 baskets. The reconfiguration of the basket layout can be addressed with council outside of the budget process, and we are exploring alternative funding sources in anticipation of a council conversation on this for our next budget discussion. Other changes include the Office of Equity and Inclusion. These transitions include the BOLD program. This is a civic engagement program for emerging immigrants and refugee leaders. This will be taken in-house rather than being used by a third party. And we will also be moving forward with the recruitment of a program manager to support the chief equity officer. Information technology will be limiting funding for professional consultant services and IT projects. Some of those include security and compliance audits. The library fund will make reductions of 1.5 FTEs and realigns positions in anticipation of changes that will occur at the operational level related to Washington County Cooperative System. And then finally, our street fund will pause $2.4 million in street reconstruction projects pending the identification of new funding sources. No one would have crossed the ocean if he could have gotten off the ship during the storm. Kettering words are a really good reminder of the importance of trusting the process while holding on to the vision, which is a stronger, more resilient Beaverton. As you can see, more storms are on the horizon based on our forecast. Our expenses, which are that top red line, are outpacing revenues, which is that blue line, which continue to remain flat. More structural solutions are required. Otherwise, the target reserve policy, which is represented by that green middle line, will not be met, and our ending fund balance, which is our reserves, that yellow line, will go negative. We've reached the limit of low impact solutions, and we're anticipating the need for fundamental change. Despite making more than $6 million in structural reductions, the forecast continues to project shortfalls of $11 million or more in the city's general fund for the next fiscal years, because the current revenue sources are growing at a slower rate when compared to our expenses. Oregon's constitution limits property taxes by confining the growth of assessed value to 3%. This includes new construction, which is placed on the tax rolls that is well below market value. The same factors impact the library. 97% of its funding comes from property taxes, both from the city and Washington County. Additionally, the street fund is limited by the state gas tax, which is plateaued because individuals are now driving more fuel-efficient vehicles. But together we can chart a course ahead for Beaverton, but we can't simply trim budget line items to meet this challenge. We will need to have a serious conversation with the community, the city council, and staff about the services that we can offer within our financial constraints and the revenue sources that are currently available to us. This will be critical work and will help set the course as our journey continues. And while the storms may continue, we're not without direction. We have a steady compass, a strong vessel, and a crew that knows how to adjust their sails. We've weathered challenges before, and together we'll do it again. In closing, I want to recognize and thank Debbie Lautner and Susan Cole of the Finance Department and our executive and leadership team for leaning into this work while always keeping the community at the front and center of the budget development process. Before we go, I want to just remind those that are watching at home a look ahead and a quick reminder that tonight is one of 2 budget meetings. The second is scheduled for May 19th, and the council meeting where we will adopt and consider the budget will be on June 3rd. We are legally required to adopt a balanced budget no later than June 30th of each year, and the new fiscal year will begin on July 1st. And so up next is the general fund, an overview, a discussion of department impacts, and then the general fund forecast. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screening and turn it back to the chair.
Thank you, City Manager. At this point, it looks like, the next agenda is the 2025 to 2026 general fund. Looks like Assistant City Manager Elizabeth Coffey is going to present that. Elizabeth, you have the floor.
And I will actually turn it over to our Finance Director, Debbie, to kick us off. Thank you.
So while the recorder gets the presentation up, we are actually going to start with discussing their citywide funds, an overview of citywide funds. Then we'll focus on the general fund, the library, and if we have time, we'll talk about the building and fleet funds, but there's a lot of information to go through. We are not following the order in the budget binder. Just to be clear, we're not talking about every single fund that we have because that would take months. So we have pulled out the funds that we usually have the most discussion around, which would be the general fund, the library fund, and the street fund. So with that, if you go on to the first slide. So as Jenny showed you, we have budget guiding principles. These were approved by council a couple years ago. There are 21 guiding principles under these main themes. So that's, they discuss transparency in budget development, belonging and climate stability forecasting, supplemental budgets, reserves, fiscal planning. You get the idea, all the different things. They are published in the budget binder when we do the adoption of the budget. And so the full text of each one of those items is included as part of the budget message if you want to look at each one of the 21 guiding principles that we use as developing our budget. If you go to the next slide, we'll get right into this. So when you're looking citywide, our total revenues by the various different types is about $273 million. We have beginning working capital of about $170 million. And then we have what we call non-revenue receipts of about $53 million for total resources in this budget of just under $500 million. Overall, our non-revenue receipts, I wanted to explain that a little bit. That's things like drawing down some funding from our WIFIA loan to pay for our projects of the Willamette water supply system and the North Transmission Line intertie. So as we have loans for those programs and as we draw down those loans, it's not revenue, we're not generating that as revenue. It's just a loan that we've borrowed the money to be able to accomplish those projects. Overall property taxes are about 24% of our citywide revenue. Transfers in, you'll see an equal number of transfers out, because transfers in and transfers out, that's the movement between the various different funds to pay for services provided by those funds. So you'll see an equal number in the transfers out on the expense side. So if you go to the next slide, we'll look at some numbers. So this is showing the committee what our fiscal year 25 budget was compared to what our proposed budget is for fiscal year 26 with some changes. And overall, you can see that our revenues are increasing very little, 0.3%. Intergovernmental revenues is decreased significantly, and that's due to there's a continued small amount of reduction in state shared revenue, and a significant reduction in Metro Affordable Housing Bond funds, because we've wrapped up some of those projects. So that's the shelter and the Kemmer Pump Station, the Purple Pipe projects, and some road infrastructure projects. Those were concluded in fiscal year 25, so that money is not rolling over into the next fiscal year. We see a decrease in fines and forfeitures, and that's reflecting the continued downward trend of court fines and fees, some of which is related to changing the vendors for our red light camera and speed enforcement program. But we are addressing this trend through a court assessment and working on process improvement to ensure that we're looking at everything to maintain our court. The increase in miscellaneous revenue is relating to using some reserves to balance this budget, and we can talk about that a little bit later. And then there's an increase in transfers that's primarily related to a $5 million transfer of bond proceeds to the WIFIA project. So we have some bond proceeds sitting out there, and we're intending to spend those this year. And so that goes into the transfers because you have to transfer the money from the bond fund to the capital fund. And typically our transfers are fairly stable year to year, but they do fluctuate depending on how the projects are moving through the system. If you go to the next slide, we'll look at our expenditures. There's a couple different views of expenditures, and overall showing that our personnel services on a citywide basis are about 34% of our budget. So our expenditures are projected to be $366.4 million. And if you recall, our revenues are projected to be a little less than that. So with contingencies and reserves, the expenditure budget is of course equal to the revenue budget. It's just under $500 million. On a citywide basis, our personnel, while still the largest component, it's only 34%. Because as you can see, we have also a large capital outlay. And interfund transfers, as I said, would equal the same as on the revenue side. If you go to the next, we'll take one more look at our expenditures. And this one is more of an expenditure to show you kind of by department. We say section because not every section equals a department. But overall, when you look on a citywide basis, you can see that Public Works is 35% of our budget, and it's 25%, I'm sorry. You can see it's very, very small, and we will send you out this presentation after the fact so you can see these numbers. But overall, on a citywide basis, our police department is 10% of our budget. Public Works, is 25% of the citywide budget. They're a very small portion of our general fund. And they also manage some internal service funds, our fleet management fund, Public Works Administration and Facilities Fund. They have special revenue funds, which is our street fund, and then enterprise funds, which would be the utility fund. So our Public Works is not just in the general fund, and they do manage a lot of the functions of the city. And our infrastructure projects are about 15% of our budget. If you go to the next slide, we can see some numbers. So overall, our materials and services are reduced, and that's primarily from the reduction in the affordable housing bond funded projects that I explained earlier, and that would be such as El Monica and the Meadowlark. So those projects were reduced from, in fiscal year 25, they're $10 million apiece, to in fiscal year 26, sharing $8 million. So that's a significant reduction from 20 million to 8 million for those two projects. The reductions also related to staff proposing some strategic cuts in our materials and services, specifically $1.1 million in the general fund to address the structural deficit that we've been working to cure, and also to we have rising costs. So in order to maintain those, we have made some strategic reductions in the M&S. Our capital outlay is decreased because we completed our shelter, and the shelter was about $4.3 million project in fiscal year 25. And then we had a Purple Pipe project, which was about $5.7 million. So both of those are not carrying forward because those projects have concluded. And then we also have transfers are increased, which is reflecting a $5 million increase in the transfer to WIFIA projects fund. So that's the to continue with the WIFIA projects. And if you go to the next slide, we'll take a little look at property tax. So the city's assessed value is quite high. That's $12 billion. Our assessed value is assumed to grow at 3.5%. We are charging the $4.62, it's 4.618, but the $4.62, which is our permanent authorized tax rate. This budget does propose to under levy property taxes for Bureau. So in our redevelopment agency, the only thing they can use their tax increment money on is to pay debt. And we, analyzing the amount of debt that they have to pay for the coming year, provided us an opportunity to under levy for Bureau and provide some a little piece of that incremental growth back to the general fund and our regional partners. The underlevying of property tax is a tool that cities can use at their discretion. It provides an opportunity to return a portion of the property tax increment to the general fund and the other partners. But this is an annual budget decision, and it's not something that happens automatically. So in this particular budget, we are recommending that we underlevy Bureau due to the fact that we don't want to strand the money and not be able to use it in the Bureau program. You go to the next slide. So this slide is slightly different because I do understand that there's likely an amendment coming forward to adjust a position where we found out we don't necessarily need to do a layoff with a small investment into fiscal year 26. We can eliminate a position, and that will come forward as an amendment to this committee at our next meeting. So the general fund number is slightly off from what you will actually approve if that amendment goes through. But what's in the budget book that I presented to you is a reduction in the general fund of 25.3 FTEs. But the amendment would change that. So overall, what that does is 11 of those positions are just transferring to another fund or two different places. And so they're not all reduced FTEs. Some of them just have moved from, say, the general fund to the street fund, or the general fund to the water fund. And so those are just different reallocations. So overall, our personnel services are, the cost is increasing by about 9.8%. Our PERS increase is 17%, as you heard in the city manager's presentation. Healthcare increases, MODA increased 7%, Kaiser increased 12%. The weighted average is around a little over 8% in total healthcare increases. We do have some cost of living adjustments in here. There's a 5% for SEIU, which is a bargained, agreed upon amount. But we don't have anything necessarily determined for management or BPA. Those are, BPA is still being negotiated. So we did make some strategic reductions to the number of personnel, and our departments continue to look at their expenditures and look at how they can be more efficient as we continue to make sure that we do right by this great city. So if you go on to the next slide, but now we'll talk a little bit specifically about the general fund. So I just do want to pause here because there's a lot of information between Jenny and myself, and if there's any questions or if you want me to just keep plowing on through.
I don't see any. If folks have questions, use the chat function. I don't see any names in the, committee member Hartmeyer-Prieg. Ashley, are you?
Yep, sorry.
That's okay.
Didn't hit unmute. Thank you, Debbie and Jenny. So I had submitted a question and I saw the answer come through, but I wanted to just talk a little bit more about beginning working capital. And I think because it's part of kind of like the overall budget strategy, and the answer was really helpful about, you know, the role of beginning working capital in healthy budget strategy. But I also just wanted to kind of ask maybe a little bit more about that, Debbie. It's beginning working capital is like, yes, carryover, but in a lot of ways that money is allocated to things, right? So maybe an expense didn't come to fruition in the prior fiscal year. And so we know that that money is committed to the thing and needs to be paid. But, you know, maybe, for example, the bill, you know, is sent the day after the new fiscal year is set to begin or something like that. So I just want to understand, because it is helpful, right? It says that it's an important pool for the buffer until we get to our the time that property taxes are submitted. But I just wanted to see if you could expand a little bit more about, like, you know, how do you get to beginning working capital, right? And that it's not just extra money.
Correct. So beginning working capital is also another name of that. For that would be fund balance or reserves. So at the end of the year, we call it ending fund balance. At the beginning of the year, we call it beginning working capital. It's all the same thing. So any unspent money or any extra revenue that may come in beyond what was projected will go into that fund balance. So at the year end, it's ending fund balance. We then look to that as we're developing the next budget to make sure we maintain the required reserve balances. But that is, there is usually some funding available to continue those, like you said, finish the contract and the other things. We have tried to over the last few years, and it's a large paradigm shift to not have a large carryover at the beginning of the year saying, oh, these are all the things that didn't finish and we're going to take our beginning working capital and obligate it to these things. We are trying to do the analysis and actually budget for those things so that we don't have a fluctuation of our beginning working capital for those carryover items. That's a work in progress. So we're still working on that.
I think if I can add one more thing for Councilor Hartmeyer-Prieg, is that so when you have excess fund balance beyond your reserve target of what's required, that excess fund balance is considered one time, and there's no way to predict that year over year we're going to have any type of excess working capital that carries forward in the next fiscal year. And so what I like to tell folks when they ask about this is a great example of one time would be if we had a whole bunch of housing built, we issue permits. There's no guarantee that I'm going to have the same amount of housing built and pulled permits in the next year. So that is one-time money, and so we treat it as such. We can put it in an undesignated contingency account for things that might come up, we could use it to help offset shortfalls in future budgets, and that will position the council to make some decisions. Or it could be used for one-time capital, but it couldn't be used for ongoing expenses like salaries, right? Or other type of ongoing services. It would only be available for one time. And every year it's not predicted and it can't be guaranteed. So working capital is a little tricky in that way, where some people may look at it and think that we have more money than we do. But from a fiscal, prudent kind of principle standpoint, we look at that money as one time and not dedicated to ongoing things like healthcare or salaries, if that's helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you. Thank you both.
Debbie, I don't see any other names, so go ahead with the presentation.
Let's talk about the general fund. So if you go to the next slide. All right, so our general fund, our revenues are projected to be a little over $96 million. We do have beginning working capital of a little over $21 million for total resources available into this budget of $117.4 million. And this is where then we talk about the beginning working capital. So beginning working capital is the initial funds available at the start of the fiscal year. Since the property tax revenues are not available for operations until November, it ensures that we have the cash flow allowing the city to cover immediate expenses such as public services and infrastructure maintenance. The initial pool of funds includes prior year underspending. Think vacancies. That's the most of our underspending comes from vacancies. And then revenue that may have outperformed our expectations. It's considered a one-time resource and does not necessarily materialize year to year. And, you know, quite frankly, as we get better at analyzing and looking at our budgets and really educating the departments on those things, we should see less fluctuation because we'll get better at what amount of that one-time funding needs to actually carry over into the next year and be budgeted as opposed to carried forward. So we're working on that, and it takes a long time to understand, and then things just happen that you're not prepared for. So overall, primary revenue source for our general fund is property taxes at 54%, and that's followed by other taxes at 16%. So overall, taxes make up 70% of our general fund. Fees for services are only about 4%, or about $4.2 million. So there's not a lot of revenue coming in from fees, but that is, you know, one of the sources that we have. If you go on to the next slide, we'll look at some numbers. So this is again a comparison of last year's budget to this year's budget on the general fund. Overall, our revenues are increasing by just under 8%. So property taxes show an increase of 3.66%, which, as you heard before, property taxes are capped at 3%. So how can it grow greater than that? So new construction does allow that to grow at a greater rate, and you know, any changes to a property. So if somebody's upgrading their kitchen, it might get reassessed and get a little bump up in the taxes. This budget does propose to under levy the property taxes on Bureau, which does provide a small amount of increase to the general fund. So part of that growth does include the recovery of a little piece of revenue from under levying in Bureau. The other taxes and right-of-way fees are showing an increase. Our franchise fees are showing an increase, and these are paid to us based on gross revenues. So as our population grows, the franchise fees increase. And also as those franchisees increase their rates and charges, then the money the city receives in revenue also increases. Our fines and forfeitures are continuing the downward trend, and that the downward trend is real similar to what we saw last year. So as I said before, we are doing an assessment of our municipal court, and we are always looking for process improvements, so to come both sides, revenue and expenditures. The miscellaneous revenues are increased because we used some reserves, about $3.2 million of reserves to which are one-time funds, and those show in the miscellaneous revenue. And our beginning fund balance remains essentially flat. There's not a lot of change there. So if you go on to the next slide, we'll talk about some expenditures. So overall, our expenditures are $101.2 million, and as you recall, the revenues are 96.2. So that shows the use of one-time funds and the reserves to balance the budget. We did use one-time funds in an amount of $5 million, which is from the ending fund balance of current fiscal year to pull into the next fiscal year. And this is from, so if you recall, $100 million budget, and we had about $2.5 million of revenue that came in better than what was projected in our budget. And we had about $2.5 million of underspending. That's part of that. In the general fund, personnel is our largest expense at 71%. And that is appropriate for a service organization because it does take people to provide services. Reserves and contingencies are $21.1 million. So reserves and contingencies are not meant to be spent. They're only meant to be spent in unforeseen circumstances or for a special purpose of the reserve. A contingency budget is important to ensure that we can remain nimble and we can pivot to address those unforeseen circumstances or capitalize on opportunities as they present themselves. Reserves for specific items we will save from year to year for things that may cost a lot of money. So we don't want to, decimate the budget by, we have to buy this thing and it's going to cost us $5 million. We'd rather save up over time to do that if we're able to plan for those things. The contingency is $11.1 million, and it meets the 11% target for the budget development that is set by council policy. And then the other half of the reserves and contingencies is really for capital and equipment replacements. So if you go on to the next slide, we can look at this a little differently. Same expenditure budget, but this time contingencies have been rolled into the chart just to show that it is a large component of the overall budget. That's the black one. That's contingencies. And again, it's a large component that's not meant to be spent. You can see police is a large share of our general fund budget at 41%. And this may seem larger than other agencies, but keep in mind that Beaverton is not a full service city. So we don't have, we have special districts that provide things for us like park service and fire service. So, if they were in our general fund, that police pie would be much smaller because we would have these other large programs that we don't have here. Non-departmental, I just want to, because it doesn't really, it's hard to understand what non-departmental is. It really is expenses that are not, that can't be applied to one specific department. They may be a citywide expense, such as the League of Cities membership, and that's also where all our transfers out go. So that's the funds that are transferred from the general fund to, for example, the fleet fund for our vehicle maintenance for, say, the police department, that's general fund funded, or to the IT fund for their services to support general fund staff. If you go to the next slide, we like to show you a picture and then show all the numbers. Pictures first. So personnel services do include step increases, COLAs per the collective bargaining agreements, the PERS rate increases, medical and dental premium increases. an amendment, so here's where I'm going to also remind you, an amendment is going to be proposed at a future deliberation that could change this so that we can avoid a layoff. So the numbers will change slightly with that amendment. Capital outlay is primarily fleet replacement for the police department. You can see that it does fluctuate year to year. We've had some issues getting some of the vehicles for the police department, and so oftentimes there's a carryover, and this is one area where we have managed to budget the carryover and reduce what we think we're going to spend and add it to next year because of delays. Contingencies and reserves contain the 11% fund balance that's required at budget development by council policy. The policy is currently states that you're to have 11% in your target at budget development and 17% when the budget concludes, so at year end. It also has a reserve for capital replacement, about $3.4 million. Reserves for equipment is about $1.2 million. So if you go to the next slide. So this again will change slightly, and I don't know if Elizabeth remembers the number is 24.12 or something like that instead of 25.3. But, and that's a change in the police department slightly to avoid a layoff. So it'll fund a position for 5 months. So in city administration, they've eliminated a couple different positions, and when we go into each department, this will be explained, kind of what they have done to adjust their budgets. But one thing I did want to point out is when you look at public works operation, you see a -11. Those positions were just transferred to different funds. So they're transferred out of the general fund, but they are transferred into other funds. So the reduction of actual FTEs that are eliminated or frozen is much less than that 25.3 because 11 of those positions are just transferred. So, and we'll talk more about what all those positions were when we get into each individual department slide, and that's coming up real soon. So if you go to the next slide, this is again the financial forecast that Jenny showed in her presentation. Overall, looking at how our ending fund balance is going below target. And it is a reality that our revenues grow at a slower pace than our expenditures. And that's just the nature of the revenues we have and some of the caps that are on those revenues. So if you go to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to Elizabeth, unless there are any questions. Seeing no names in the chat.
All right, thank you very much. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee. For those of you that I haven't met yet, my name is Elizabeth Coffey. I'm one of the Assistant City Managers here at Beaverton. Next slide, please. I'm here tonight to give you an overview of the great work that departments are going to be doing in the next fiscal year, as well as go over any significant programmatic changes that they are going to be experiencing over the next fiscal year. So on each slide on the left-hand side, you'll be seeing some strategic priorities that departments are going to be focusing on over the next year. And on the right, there will be the detail about what will be changing. And so I'll go over this at a pretty high level. I know you've been hearing a lot of presentations already this evening, and if there's any questions at the end, we can certainly dive into a little more detail. So first up is our City Council budget. There's no significant additions or reductions to their budget proposed for the coming fiscal year. The Council's work plan is governed by the 8 pillars that you see here on the screen, ranging from the inclusive community to housing to quality infrastructure, and that will be guiding their work in the coming year. Next slide, please. Okay, so city administration, for ease of this presentation, we've combined the city manager's office, the city recorder's office, and the city attorney onto this one slide. And so the priorities for the coming year include implementing the fiscal recovery priority of council and working on those financial sustainability initiatives. Jenny has mentioned in her city manager presentation the various operational and organizational assessments that we're working on either completing or starting. And then we plan on initiating the development of a citywide strategic plan to identify a long-term vision for the community. And then our city attorney's office will be continuing to provide responsive legal services for the city and mitigate risk. So reductions in this particular work area include 2 FTE, which are full-time equivalent employee positions that were slated to provide support to the city manager and city recorder. There had been a plan to do a pilot program of a public defender office, and that has been cut from this proposed budget. And we are pursuing a contract with a law firm for expediency and cost efficiency to provide those services. And then we were able to reduce some expenses, including our public agenda web access services, by changing contractors. Next slide, please. So our Office of Equity and Inclusion, if you're not familiar with that office, they not only lead the efforts for the city's equity and inclusion, but they also manage the city's events program, as well as the Center for Mediation and Dialogue. And so key priorities for this office include filling a vacant manager position, as was mentioned earlier today, establishing a comprehensive DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategic vision and framework, implementing this speaker series, and then in conjunction with the city's IT department, developing an accessible document policy so that we can comply with federal ADA accessibility requirements. Our events program is really going to be focusing on ways that we can streamline our event operations and reduce the amount of staff and resources that are needed so we can be as cost effective as possible. And one of the priorities for our mediation office will be to promote a restorative dialogue program in partnership with a county and a community organization. For this particular program, there has been a reduction in an engagement contract that is shared with our development division and planning division. And the BOLD Emerging Leaders Training Program, as mentioned, will be continuing in-house with staff. And then 2 temporary grant-funded FTE will be eliminated upon the end of the grant. Next slide, please. For our finance department, there's 2 key priorities for the coming fiscal year. The first is really a focus on internal and external customer service. And then the second, of course, would be implementing fiscal sustainability initiatives. A key focus will be looking at the business license study and revenue audits. There's no significant programmatic changes to this department other than a minor increase in support for our payroll management and processing services. Next slide, please. Our human resources team has 5 key priorities that they're focusing on in the coming year. They will be championing an inclusive work culture, and then they will be providing increased training and development opportunities, as well as leveraging a newly implemented performance management system that will help managers stay on top of making sure that goals are aligned with the city council and city manager performance expectations. The Human Resources Department will also be working on designing a more cost-effective and strategic healthcare plan and strengthening and streamlining the hiring process. There's no significant programmatic changes in the Human Resources Department, although they do have a couple of reductions. They have a FTE that they are reducing, as well as some minor reductions in their professional training and development budget. Next slide, please. Our Information Technology and Services Department is quite busy next year, as you can see here on the slide. A real key priority will be continuing to strengthen cybersecurity and data privacy to protect the city. They will also be working on developing a plan and design for the city's data center relocation from our Griffith Park location to our public safety building. And then another key element will be really developing the requirements and laying the foundation for a new finance, payroll, and human resources enterprise system. Key reductions for our IT department include reducing consulting assistance for projects, reducing the budget for some non-essential software programs, and then some minor reductions in computer equipment, supplies, office expenses, and the like. Next slide, please. So for our sustainability and recycling department, another very busy department with a lot of strategic priorities. Key will be completing the new Beaverton Climate Action Plan. And then they will also be working on projects such as electric vehicle use and deployment, as well as a multifamily and business food scraps program, a composting program and pilot, and completing a once every 3-year review of our franchise system, as well as an update of our franchise rules. This program is one that has the potential to be pretty impacted by the uncertainty of funding at the federal level, so we'll be monitoring that closely in the coming year. We are eliminating a grant-funded part-time position and then making some reductions to materials and services to eliminate some consultant services and bring that work in-house. Next slide, please. So for our community engagement and communications team, the strategic priorities that you see here on the screen are a result of the communication strategic plan that was conducted, and those recommendations are intended to implement the outcomes of that plan. They plan to focus on structuring core communication and engagement functions and making sure they're aligned and working together. To ensure consistent, transparent messaging and reach. Hand in hand with that, they are working on improving our social media and engagement tools. The communications team will also be working on some visual storytelling by developing some templates and graphic standards. And then the community engagement side of the team will be working on building sustainable and impactful volunteer programs and acting on key findings from the boards and commissions assessment. And so not big programmatic changes for this particular area, just some minor reductions in promotional and marketing expenses and minor reduction in neighborhood program professional services budget. For the municipal court, so I'm pleased to note that we have gotten a grant that fully funds the assessment that you see referenced here in the first bullet point. So this assessment will go over the court processes and procedures and workflows to ensure that we are conducting the court in the most efficient and optimal way possible to provide services to the community. As Jenny mentioned earlier, our Be Sober Court was nationally recognized, and so they will be mentoring new and established courts in the coming fiscal year. And as also mentioned, we are looking at contracting with a law firm in addition to individual court-appointed attorneys to evaluate that as a potential sustainable model going forward. We do have a planned implementation of a speed red light camera in the coming fiscal year, and so we will be monitoring if we can get some increased citation volume from that expansion. There are no significant additions or reductions to the court budget. Next slide, please. For our police department, they, of course, will continue the priority of their commitment to maintaining a safe community. They do continue to be in a highly competitive recruitment market, so they are continuing to work on hiring and recruiting processes to get the best candidates here at the city's police department. They are continuing also a focus on modern policing and really identifying and evaluating technology that might assist them in their work, including online reporting tools. And then there'll be a focus on really quality training and mentorship to help them develop specialized skills. The reductions were mentioned a little bit earlier today by our city manager in her presentation. There's been a reduction of the bike team by 2 officers, so from 6 to 4, a reduction of the mental health response team officer and civilian clinician, reduction of 1 lieutenant, record supervisor, and support specialist, And then we are upgrading one officer position to a sergeant position to help offset some of the workload for these reductions. Next slide, please. So community development, there's quite a lot of projects that you see here on this screen. And for those of you that are newer to the committee that might not be aware, our community development division consists of a variety of teams. That includes building, planning, economic development, code services, arts, and Bureau, the Beaverton Urban Renewal Agency. And they're really focused on building a healthy, vibrant, and complete community. And that's what these projects here on the screen represent, from the Downtown Loop project to the Cooper Mountain implementation to our parks and open spaces. And so they have a reduction of a couple of different planning positions within our planning division, as well as transportation planning. And then we do have a reduction of arts program staff. And as was mentioned earlier, the support to the Arts Commission remains in place. They also have a variety of material and services reductions, and that impacts our business improvement grants, the engagement contract with Unite Oregon, with that work coming in-house to be managed by staff, reduction of the affordable housing program, and then elimination of support for the Beaverton Arts Market that's held in partnership with the RESER. Next slide. Public Works, and so Debbie alluded to this earlier. Public Works has a couple of different funds within that department here at the city. Pretty small impact on the general fund, but for the ease of presentation, the priorities and the reductions and additions you see on this screen represent all of the funds that Public Works covers, which includes our street fund and our utility funds as well. And so they have three key priorities to design and construct key infrastructure projects. And so you can see some water safety and resiliency projects here. They're secondly focusing on developing a long-term funding strategy with a special emphasis on the street fund to work to get that fund to be a little more financially sustainable. And then they really want to focus on facilitating development and exploring that project that you see here on the screen. So what has changed? They are adding a small number of staff in the utility funds, and those are accounted for within their financial plans for those funds. In the street fund, they are eliminating some planned street overlays and reducing some ADA ramp replacements. There will be some reduced service levels in the janitorial and general service contracts in our facilities division. And then they do plan on purchasing and implementing new software so that we can better understand and protect the city's water infrastructure. Next slide. So I'm covering the library fund, but I'm going to go ahead and pause there in case there's any questions before I move to the library fund.
Looks like we have one. Councillor Husson.
Yes, a couple of questions and comments before we move on to library. The first question, and this was a question I emailed in, and I will just ask it again here. I was trying to get a sense of external organizations that we provide funding to. So for example, like we're hearing about the PCC, but I can't see that in the budget. So is there a way to get some sort of sense of like what external organizations? I know that I got a couple of orgs answered, but maybe not all of them.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is that there's a variety of funding that happens across the city from all different departments for a variety of reasons. And so we can get you a more detailed report of that, and we just weren't able to pull that together in time for the meeting today.
Okay, that's fine. I understand. I mean, I'm like, do I ask these questions or do I just make these comments? Like, I want to thank everyone. I know how hard it is. I'm just processing all the cuts, right? The bold, the police, bike team, the clinician, and I'm just, yeah. I guess I will just say this and then I don't want to slow us down from moving on because we have more. The reason I asked the question about the organizations that we're partnering with is it's important for, I think, us to understand all of the different things that we're funding and whether we're really funding the things that align with our values and just having a deeper understanding around that. And so obviously when we hear about Future Connect, there's concern, but there's other programs as well. I know the Office of Equity is doing a lot of work, but there's still a lot of gaps that we're seeing with our immigrant and refugee communities. I understand the rationale behind the BOLD program. I want to say for the record, I'm just sad to see that. It's a program that we do with Unite Oregon, and I think sometimes institutions are not always geared to do some of the equity work that needs to happen, and that's why sometimes we partner with external organizations. So I think, I want to say that I want to talk about the arts program manager. I guess I want to say, like, I'm bummed to see all of this, and I just want to say that. I hope that we can, as we continue down this conversation, that we're just thinking and I do appreciate the work, but I'm saddened as we watch everything that's happening federally, and it feels like we're really cutting into some of the groups that really need all of this the most. So I do appreciate this work, and I just want to call out how sad I am, and that I hope that as we go through this process, we're looking at ways that we can be more intentional with our funding and our partnerships so that we can move forward. So thanks, Elizabeth.
Councilor Kimmy?
Yes, thank you for all that. I have more questions, but I'll ask just two regards to current presentation. Even though we have a reduction of the FTEs, it seems like our expenditure or salary keeps growing, right? So even though we transfer 7 people out of public works and others, we still have like 11 to 12, maybe 13 people FTE that will be letting go or is eliminated, but we still have increase of $500,000 or above in the pay that we make. Is that going to be the trend? How it's going to go for the future? Because I worry about how many are we eliminating, and then salaries keep going up whenever we can never catch up. That's one question. And then another question, I'll just give you two. You said there's going to be future, maybe working with the attorney's office for the municipal court. And you said there's going to be no addition of any funding that you expect to happen. Is that true? Or do you expect that there's going to be some funding or expenditure from the court if we go out of the court to have partnership with other attorney's office for representation?
Counselor, I'll address your second question first. So for the municipal court, we had talked at one time about doing a pilot program of bringing some staff in-house to form the public defender's office, and that proposal has been eliminated from this budget for the coming fiscal year. And so right now, what we're working on within our existing budget is contracting out for some of those services through a law firm and trying that to see if that might be a little bit more fiscally responsible or sustainable in the long run. And so no additional funding is being asked at this time. And we're going to try it out and evaluate that and see how that goes moving forward. Regarding your second question around personnel costs, I mean, we can also see this in materials and services as well, right? And so even with reductions, the cost of doing business has gone up greatly when you have 17% PERS increase and that type of thing. You see that illustrated really well in that forecast slide, where you do see our expenditures continuing to grow disproportionate to the revenue, which remains flat. And that's really, you really hit on the crux of the structural financial problem that the city is facing. And it's something that we're going to need to have more conversations about in terms of how we might address that structural gap.
Yes, thank you for that. So I'd love to, for the near future, that we can address that issue head on in the future conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Teeter, you're up.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I just have one comment and one question. The first is a comment just in general for the budget committee and anybody watching. When we're talking about such a significant reduction in FTEs, most of these are not filled positions. And so, Elizabeth, there's one or two currently filled FTEs that are being cut, or can you clarify that number?
Yes, so I'm going to attempt to go off the top of my head. I believe it was 2.45 filled FTEs. And one of those, I think the 0.45 was, or 0.5 was a voluntary reduction in hours in our library staff. One other filled position in our library, we are hoping that there may be an opportunity for that individual to transition to a different vacant position. And that's really part of the ongoing efforts that we're going to be doing in the library, where we have the Washington County Cooperative Library Services, and I'm kind of, I guess, jumping ahead a little bit to the next part of the slide, but they are taking on centralized collections in the coming years. And so in the library, we will be making some transitions from certain types of positions as the collections are centralized to different types of positions. So we are hoping within the library that we're able to find positions for everybody that is impacted. And so we, I believe, are just left with one actual filled position, and that's in our HR office.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Elizabeth. I think that language is really important for us as we move through this process, that by and large, we're not letting people go and we're able to retain a lot of these staff. So staff and management have done a really great job. Elizabeth and Jenny, thank you. Have done a really great job planning for this. We saw something similar a couple years ago with reductions in the library, where we were able to reassign and find jobs for all of those people as well. So this is hard to stomach, but management staff have thought through this really well. So thank you for the clarification, Elizabeth. Okay, I've got one question. It's about the court fines and fees. So we are getting the new red light photo radar camera software, the new vendor, they're getting up and onboarded. We're showing a pretty significant reduction in potential income from those. But there is also the comment that there's anticipated to be increased workload. So I just want to make sure I understand the increased workload would come later on in the fiscal year after the new program is installed and there's a wave of new fines coming through that staff have to sort through as people adjust behavior. But we're seeing a less total revenue because it's not going to be here for the full year. Is that right?
Yeah, and so I think generally we tend to budget pretty conservatively when it comes to our revenue, and we know that it might take a little bit of time to get the new camera up and running. We might have to take things offline, et cetera. And so we are very conservatively budgeting for the decrease in revenue. But we are hopeful that once the cameras are up, and well, we don't actually hope that people are speeding or running red lights, but we know that that does happen to the best of us. And so we anticipate that down the road we will see increased citations come through. And so we are going to be really monitoring and using a data-informed approach to look at what impact that has on our citations and our workload going forward when we bring one of those new cameras online.
Okay, thank you. And I would imagine it would be easier to forecast in the future once we've actually got these installed, and
Absolutely.
future years will be a little bit easier.
That's our hope, yes.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Kevin. Committee member Julie.
Thank you. And just want to express my appreciation as well. This has been really helpful. So thank you for all the commentary as well. So just a comment and a question. My comment, you all did such a beautiful job. As a first timer, you made it really easy to understand around staff numbers. My commentary, or just a question, more the comment would be, it would be really helpful to understand what optimal staff capacity looks like. So when I'm looking at those staff numbers, I don't necessarily know at what capacity they're working, if they're working overtime, if they're at 150%, that sort of thing, just to understand what is optimal across the board, and then where are those concerns that you may have that we're burning people out, that we need to, the red areas that we need to start looking at from a city perspective. So that would be really helpful. And then the question on the former slide that you had around the ADA ramp reduction, I'm just interested in understanding what does that pace look like? Is there reduction, meaning that we're just not going to do it, we being city there, but from an ADA perspective, that we're just saying we're not going to do those, or is that over time, that it's just a reduction or spaced out and that roadmap just is delayed? Just thinking of Bureau's really important work and making downtown optimal for all. And so as we look at ADA ramps, just thinking, how does that work? And if there has been consideration for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe our Public Works Director, Tim Elsey, is on the call, so I might ask him to weigh in on that, as he will know better than I will. Thank you, Tim.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
We're just putting a temporary pause on our ADA ramps. We are federally regulated to have an ADA upgrade policy, which we do, and we've made great progress on that over the years. But this particular year, we're just going to have to put a pause on what we're doing with the ADA ramps.
Thank you, Tim. I don't see any other questions. I do have a quick question for City Manager. I think, or maybe you know this, Elizabeth, over the last couple fiscal years, has it been 20? How many positions have we eliminated in total, Jenny?
I want to say with this proposed budget, I know we're probably at least at 30, and with this proposed budget, could be close to 50.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's just important context to know that we've been really, conscious about that. So, and thoughtful about where it's going. So, back to Elizabeth, back to you.
John, can I jump in real quick?
Oh, sure, Kevin. Sorry, I didn't see you.
No, I popped in again. Sorry about that. Okay, I've just got one additional detail I want to add. I think Committee Member Langford's question was really good about the ADA ramps. I had similar red flags that were popping up when I was reading through that. I think just some context for the committee here and people watching, City Council will be talking about a transportation utility fee in the future. So we're thinking about how we fund our streets and sidewalks in general. So that conversation is coming, and hopefully that'll help shore up some of the gaps we've got here too. But we don't know how that'll land yet. So we'll see.
Good reminder, Kevin. Thank you. Mayor, you're up.
I don't want to dig down on ADA ramps a little bit more, but I do think it's really important that this is a federal requirement, an unfunded federal requirement. And I travel extensively, and I have never seen a city that has as many ADA ramp upgrades that we have done. And we have been under intense criticism from our community because we're often doing ramps in areas that really don't make a lot of sense or ahead of construction. And we know a few of the companies and contractors we work with, they've had to be redone multiple times. And so I, for one, asked us to take a pause a long time ago to really evaluate the program that we're doing and make sure that it's being done with street overlay, that it's being done in intersections that make sense. And it's been really hard to justify to the community that we have done this. And if you look to all the cities around us, they've not done the ADA ramps that we have. So we have a significant overproduction of these and at the neglect of other things. Because again, the federal government said to do it, but the federal government gave us no money to do it. And then we took that from the street fund. And so we're having this is what is happening when a lot of our values go head to head in a budget. So it is important to us, and we have another chance to relook at it again, but we really do need a better analysis of how we're doing it.
Thank you, Mayor. Elizabeth, back to you.
Okay. So switching gears now to the library fund, I'm going to talk a little bit about the high-level priorities for the library, and then I'll go very briefly over the financials for the library as well. So if we can go to the next slide, please. The library is in a little bit of a period of transition and an interesting time, and the priorities that you see here on the slide reflect this. And so I might start, I think, maybe from the bottom actually and work my way up. So for those of you that are newer to the committee or members of the public watching, the City of Beaverton is a member of the Washington County Cooperative Library Services Partnership, or WCCLS. And they together, we, with 9 other jurisdictions and 3 nonprofits, we form a cooperative library service. And we are currently going through a project to really look at long-term funding options for sustainable library services We're looking at the service boundaries that we all serve through our libraries, and then we're also looking at just how we're governed as a cooperative library service. As part of that project, per our second bullet point and what I had mentioned earlier, the centralized collections will be, they will be centralized within the WCCLS partnership, and that transition will be happening July 2027, because it was determined that would be a more cost-effective and efficient way for us to handle collections as a cooperative. And so the library will be really working on aligning our organizational structure to prepare for that transition, and then will be a key member and continue to be a key member of the WCCLS Funding and Governance Project, advocating for the needs of Beaverton. And then as part of that, for the first bullet point that's covered here, the library will be going through a strategic planning process to really look at how the library services have changed, how will they change in the future, and how can we meet community needs, what's important to the community and to our council and our library going forward. And so we briefly talked a little bit about the reductions that they're undertaking in the coming fiscal year, and they really are around that centralized collection transition and getting prepared now for that transition. And so they have the FTE that they are eliminating that you see here on the screen are a result of that transition, as well as the reduction of collections and supplies. And then they have some minor reductions in their programming budget and a minor reduction to temporary employees. And so from here, we'll dive a little bit more into the specific numbers for the library fund. And so you can see here on this screen, library fund revenues are projected to be approximately $12.3 million with expenditures of $12.7 million. And so when you add in their beginning working capital, their total resources for the year are approximately $13.2 million. I think that Debbie mentioned this earlier. Property taxes really are the primary source of funding for the library. So 97% of the funding for the library comes in from property taxes. 45% of those property taxes are from the city, and 55% are from the county through two sources. One is through the WCCLS cooperative that I mentioned just a minute ago, as well as the county's permanent rate and the levy, the operating levy that they have that helps fund libraries across the county. That levy expires in 2026, and the county is working on putting a renewal on the ballot to voters this November. So on the expenditure side, we have reserves and contingencies of about $400,000 that are being used to balance the budget this coming fiscal year. Next slide. So if you don't like charts and you'd rather just see the numbers, that's what this slide is really showing. It's the same information, just in a slightly different format. And then I would just note that this coming fiscal year, we are able to retain our current programming and hours at the library through this budget. Next slide, please. So looking forward at the library's financial forecast, this really shows you how important it is that we participate in the WCCLS funding initiative and that we do our own strategic planning efforts about where we want our library to go in the future. So at the top of the screen, the red line represents the total expenditures and the green line is our total revenues. And so you can see that our expenses are more than our revenues, and that gap widens over time without any action. And on the bottom, the orange is our target line for what we would like to hit for our reserves for the library fund. And the blue line represents where we project to actually be. So we're slightly under our target for this coming fiscal year. And so that really makes the sustainable funding for the library a high priority, and why we're really focused in on those three key strategic priorities for the coming year, so that we can really get to a place where the funding for the libraries is more sustainable. And with that, I believe I'm turning it back over to Debbie to talk a little bit about the building fund.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Over to you, Debbie. I don't see any questions or anything.
All right, so just a couple more slides to go through. So briefly going through the building fund. So the building fund is a special revenue fund. Most of the building fees are set at the state level. So this fund is funded through our building permit fees that are paid by developers and property owners. They increase annually each year in February by CPI, along with all our other fees. The last CPI increase was 2.83%. That was done just a couple months ago. And this fund is remaining pretty stable. So if you go to the next slide, we can look at the numbers. Here we go. So overall, building fees increased on February 1st, like I said, and they're slated to increase again by the CPI next February. We did add one building inspector mid-year, so it's not reflected in the actual budget for 25 because it was added mid-year. And then we also increased some overhead related to general fund support to this fund. So you'll see that the transfers out have increased, and some of that is because we were not charging for the support the general fund provides to the building fund. And if you go to the next slide, we'll talk very briefly about our fleet management fund. So our fleet management fund is one of our internal service funds. It's a very small fund, but this it's funded from transfers for all the funds that utilizes fleet services. So in the general fund, the primary user of fleet services would be police because they have the most vehicles that they use. In the utilities, they have different types of equipment as well that are all maintained by our fleet program. So expenses related to our fleet replacement, they're budgeted in each fund and then transferred over to the fleet fund. So if you go to the next slide, we can look at the numbers. And you can see again why it is a very small fund. Overall, the beginning working capital is going down because we actually, the vehicle replacement reserve funds reside in the actual funds that are paying for them and not in the fleet fund. And that is something that we are researching, trying to get all the fleet fund into one fund so we can better manage our fleet. But overall, just some minor changes based on normal costs. They really aren't changing their operation much at all. And so if you go to the next slide. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Debbie. What questions? We'll give everyone a second to put their name in if they have questions or comments, particularly about the building and the fleet fund.
Or the library.
Or the library. I'm not seeing any. Going once, going twice. Okay, folks. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our agenda for this evening. I will recess us until the next meeting, which is May 19th at 6 p.m., where we'll discuss public works, capital improvement, a couple other things. And then, of course, the fun part happens where we will deliberate on this budget and discuss it. So strongly encourage you, if you're watching, if you're as nerdy as I am, to watch the next one. And to my colleagues on the budget committee, we will see you on May 19th at 6 p.m. Don't be late. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.